On the factory floor, a giant cable spool spins faster than anyone realizes, turning routine work into a trap. On the factory floor, one worker feeds material onto a massive rotating spool, hands guiding the line just inches from the drum. Around him, the hum of machines fills the air, while another worker stands nearby watching. The rotating drum suddenly catches the loose feed, yanking it into its grip without hesitation. The spool accelerates, the line tightening with each spin as tension builds. What began as a routine feed instantly turns into a runaway hazard, the machine's momentum pulling harder with every rotation until the crew scrambles to shut it down. Never, ever reach into or feed a moving reel by hand, because once it grabs, you won't have the strength to fight it. On a narrow slope, a backhoe loader edges forward with its bucket down, but the ground beneath is far less solid than it looks. A backhoe loader works across the edge of a hillside construction site, its front bucket lowered, scraping and leveling. A metal fence runs the length of the slope, a thin barrier against the forested drop below. The operator moves carefully, tires pressing into soft fill. From above, the surface looks stable, but underneath the soil is uncompacted, sitting on the slope without reinforcement. Every pass of the machine shifts weight, pressing closer to the drop. The loader creeps forward, bucket raised against the wall. Suddenly, the ground gives way. The fill collapses, undermining the slope and sending the machine lurching toward the drop. Dust and debris surge downward as soil, rock, and steel tumble together, showing how quickly unstable ground can fail. Never, ever operate loaders, cranes, or excavators on unreinforced or uncompacted edges, and never assume a freshly graded slope will hold the weight of machinery, because soil without compaction has no strength against sudden load. A truck is unloading, but the real danger comes crashing from above. In an industrial yard, a dump truck sits heavy with stones. Its tailgate is locked tight, holding back a mountain of rock. A worker steps forward to do the job the hard way, manually releasing the latch. The focus is on the truck, on the shifting load behind the gate. What no one notices is the bigger risk lurking overhead. The worker pulls the latch. The tailgate swings free and rock begins to tumble as expected. But before the zone clears, something shifts overhead. A massive boulder, unsettled by the release, suddenly breaks loose. Gravity takes hold, and in an instant, the unloading area transforms into chaos. Never, ever stay beneath unstable overhead material. Hazards can strike from above when you least expect it, and once they fall, there is no time to react. Unloading zones must be cleared fast, and overhead areas must be secured before any work begins. In a quiet workshop, one careless spray turns a simple engine test into an inferno. A blue SUV sits lifted, its hood wide open, cables snaking out to a charger. A young worker holds a spray can near the intake, attempting to coax the reluctant engine to life. The space is cluttered, bags, cans, and electrical cords, leaving no margin for error. At first, it seems routine. The worker sprays the flammable liquid, confident it will help ignite combustion, but instead of a controlled response, the vapors catch instantly. A flash of fire bursts from the intake, racing upward and spreading through the confined space. In seconds, the small workshop fills with heat and smoke, turning a simple test into a full-blown fire emergency. Never, ever introduce accelerants or flammable sprays near an engine intake while it's being cranked. The combination of fuel, mist, heat, and ignition sources creates an explosive hazard that turns routine maintenance into catastrophe. A single moment of carelessness near an excavator can bring down more than just dirt. On a small construction site, workers stand inside a narrow trench as a yellow excavator digs inches away. The ground is unstable, the walls already cracked, but work continues with little clearance. Every move of the bucket shakes the soil and the structure above them. The excavator's arm scrapes the trench wall, and in an instant the structure gives way. Soil and debris collapse outward, flooding the narrow space and burying tools and materials. What had looked stable moments before unravels in seconds, leaving no margin for escape. Never, ever allow workers to remain inside an excavation when heavy machinery is operating directly against unstable walls. In the cramped lanes of a loading yard, a forklift creeps forward in near silence, closing in on a worker who has no idea the machine is right behind him. A worker moves steadily down the narrow path, flanked by stacks of covered cargo. Just behind, a forklift pushes forward with a heavy load lifted high, the driver's view blocked by the stack he's carrying. The worker remains unaware, steps away from the machine's advancing front. Each second, the gap narrows as the forklift edges forward, its raised load blocking the driver's view. The path ahead disappears, leaving no safe clearance for those on the ground. What began as routine movement suddenly becomes a blind hazard in motion. Never ever walk directly in front of a moving forklift, and never operate one with loads lifted so high that the driver's vision is blocked. Because when visibility is lost, awareness disappears, and the machine becomes a blind threat to anyone in its path. A routine minute on a busy textile line turns risky. The second unsecured fabric meets a bare rotating part that never should have been reachable. A small garment shop floor with several operators seated shoulder to shoulder around a cone-winding station. A circular winder spins at chest height, while filled cones and tools crowd the table. Clothing is loose, and the machine runs with exposed rotating belt and open nip points. No fixed guard and no interlocked cover at the feed side. As the worker's dupatta brushes the spinning winder, the fabric snags and whips into the drum. In seconds, the machine vibrates violently, shaking the crowded table. Tools scatter as operators rush to cut the power. Only when the motor stops does the runaway motion finally subside. Eliminate entanglement hazards at the source. Guard every rotating part and interlock access so the winder cannot run when the feed area is open. And require close-fitting workwear, no scarves, dupattas, around turning machinery. High above the rail platform, danger hides in the lines overhead, waiting for just one mistake. On a raised maintenance platform, a lone worker stands near overhead electrical lines. The walkway is narrow, the voltage above immense, and every move demands caution. As he leans in, the gap closes. In a sudden flash, high voltage arcs downward, leaping across the air to the platform. The instant surge transforms the quiet walkway into a blinding storm of light, a stark reminder of how little clearance electricity requires. Never, ever work near energized overhead lines without isolation. Electricity leaps farther than you think. Electricity doesn't give warnings twice. Always de-energize, always verify isolation, and always respect the invisible reach of high voltage. At a gunpowder line, a single spark meets a drifting cloud, and the entire building answers at once. A small crew works on a raised loading platform. Bags are being hoisted and tipped into a red feeder that drops material onto a conveyor toward a hopper. The air is dusty. Spilled granules skitter across sheet metal decking. Handrails and frames form a tight lattice around motors' bearings and belts. Then the atmosphere shifts. In an instant, ignition sparks a chain reaction through the dust cloud, racing along conveyors and across the platform. Suspended particles lift and fuel the blast, pressurizing the air and spreading fire through ducts and framing. A second surge follows, showing how quickly dust can amplify into disaster. Never ever handle energetic powders in a dusty, ungrounded, partially confined space. Eliminate the fuel in the air, the spark on the equipment, and the places where pressure can build, because a small flash in a dust cloud becomes a traveling fire front, then a secondary explosion that the structure itself amplifies. In a freight yard, a driver jumps out of his cab in a rush, without securing the truck, and the vehicle begins to drift. A worker in a high-visibility jacket moves behind the container, opening the lock and seals. His focus is on the doors. His back is to the lane. Nearby, a truck stops hurriedly. The driver, rushing to get out, leaves the cab without applying the parking brake or chocking the wheels. On the slight grade of the lane, the vehicle's mass is poised to move. The unattended truck begins to roll, inching forward into the narrow lane. The massive trailer drifts steadily, shifting out of alignment and disrupting the unloading area. In moments, the routine yard space transforms into a hazard zone, showing how quickly an unsecured vehicle can create danger. Never, ever exit a truck without fully securing it. Parking brake set, transmission secured, engine stabilized, and wheels chocked where required, because an unbraked vehicle can roll and turn any standing space into a deadly pinch point. In a quiet corner of the factory, a single sheet of material turned into a sudden trap when it caught on the machine's rollers. Inside the factory, a worker stood close to the machine, carefully guiding a wide sheet into the moving rollers as he had done many times before, the steady hum of the line filling the air. To anyone watching, it seemed like nothing more than another ordinary run, smooth and controlled from start to finish. Then, without warning, the sheet twists as it feeds in, jamming at the rollers. The machine grips it with unstoppable force, pulling it in faster than anyone could react. In an instant, a routine feed becomes a runaway hazard, with the rollers driving forward relentlessly. Never, ever attempt to guide or adjust material while the rollers are still turning, because the same grip that feeds sheets smoothly can also trap and drag with unstoppable force when things go wrong. Inside a steel workshop, a massive steel coil shifts, and in an instant, the workshop floor turns into a race against gravity. On the workshop floor, a single massive coil rests precariously on its base. Its polished surface hides the danger of its weight, thousands of pounds balanced with nothing to hold it steady. Two workers stand close, finishing their tasks, unaware that the coil's center of gravity has already betrayed them. Without warning, the coil shifts forward, breaking free from its balance. The polished surface offers no resistance, and the massive weight tumbles. In an instant, the workshop transforms into a danger zone as the steel coil gathers momentum, slamming into the ground with crushing force. The sudden impact makes clear how quickly instability can turn routine work into chaos. Heavy coils must never be left standing unsecured because once they begin to roll, no human strength or instinct can stop them. Stability restraint systems and clear exclusion zones are the only defenses against their sheer momentum. Anything less is a gamble with physics itself. One spray too close and the air explodes with fury. A worker rises in a bucket lift, the pole towering against the clear blue sky. His task is supposed to be routine, but above him clings a hornet's nest, an unplanned hazard in his path. With only a can of spray in hand, he leans upward, aiming at the nest just feet away. The confined bucket leaves him boxed in, offering no quick escape if things go wrong. The instant the spray hits, the hornets erupt, swarming outward in every direction. The air around the lift fills with movement, the confined bucket offering no cover. What began as a simple attempt to clear the nest now spirals into a full-scale hazard, with the elevated worker suddenly cut off from a safe retreat. Never, ever spray a hornet or wasp nest from close range, especially while elevated. Always keep maximum distance and use proper control methods from the ground, or leave it to professionals trained for pest removal. In a single careless step, a worker moves through a doorway and straight toward a hidden void that offers no second chances. While delivering food in a building under construction, a worker in a yellow jacket moves toward the doorway. The entrance looks clear, but just beyond it lies a wide open pit. No barriers, no warnings, nothing to mark the danger. The worker approaches with a steady pace, eyes forward, unaware of what waits directly in the path. Reaching the doorway, the worker steps forward, only to find nothing beneath his foot. The unguarded opening turns the clear-looking path into a sudden drop zone, exposing the danger left unmarked in the workspace. A hole in the floor is a trap waiting for the unwary. Guard it, cover it, mark it, before someone steps where there's nothing to stand on. What's obvious to one person can be invisible to another. On a drilling rig, pressure is invisible until the system fails and steel whips loose with unbelievable force. The rig floor is crowded with equipment. Heavy lines, clamps, and joints run in every direction, forming a Chickson loop, the high-pressure piping system that drives critical oil field operations. These pipes don't just carry fluid, they carry pressure, often thousands of pounds per square inch. Workers in coveralls and helmets move in close quarters, adjusting valves and tools. Then in seconds, the routine shatters. A Chickson connection fails, and the loop jolts under sudden pressure. Energy surges through the system, shaking the rig floor as tools scatter and alarms rise. The controlled operation dissolves instantly into chaos, exposing the raw force of pressure unleashed. Never, ever stand in the line of fire of high-pressure equipment. If a hose, pipe, or loop fails, it will release its energy instantly, and no human can move fast enough to escape. Also, Chickson loops and high-pressure lines demand constant inspection, proper maintenance, and disciplined training. A worker pushes against a tractor tire for leverage, but then the force turns dangerous. Inside a small workshop, a tractor stands parked. One worker lies on a creeper beneath it, while another helps position him from behind. Instead of relying on proper equipment, the worker braces his leg against the heavy rear tire. The tire isn't moving, but its size and tread create a point of pressure no human body should ever lean into. As he pushes harder, the tread grips and resists. Suddenly, the tire's force shifts back against him, overpowering his stance. The leverage he thought was steady collapses, and in that instant, the hazard of using his body as a brace becomes impossible to ignore. Never, ever use your body as leverage against heavy equipment. Even when parked, tractors and tires exert enormous force that can cause serious injury. On a busy loading yard, a forklift was misused as a lift, and in seconds, control was lost. The scene is outside a warehouse, trucks lined up, trailers stacked with massive steel coils. Workers move quickly, preparing to secure the load under a tarp. The coils are heavy, round, and unstable if not covered properly. But instead of using proper equipment for overhead work, one worker is raised on the forks of a forklift. The yellow machine lifts him high, balancing him precariously above the coils. For a moment, it looks like the tarp will be spread smoothly, but what follows is a dangerous turn. As the tarp shifts, the forklift tilts forward under the redistributed weight. The load shifts the balance of the machine, and in seconds the forklift begins to topple. The tarp scatters as the equipment tips, turning routine unloading into a sudden hazard and forcing the site to halt operations. Never, ever use a forklift to lift people. Forks are designed to carry loads, not lives, and one misuse can turn the equipment into a falling hazard. And most importantly, when a machine starts to tip, no one should ever try to hold it up. At a warehouse dock, a reversing truck drifts too close to the entrance, turning routine unloading into a moment of sudden danger. It is early in the day, with workers and security staff moving through their usual tasks as a delivery truck prepares to dock. The vehicle is packed tight with heavy cargo, and one worker stands at the warehouse entrance, guiding the process as the truck begins its slow reverse. The scene looks controlled, but the space between the truck and the building is far narrower than it appears. As the truck eases backward, its alignment drifts off-center, narrowing the gap against the solid warehouse wall. With no barrier or signal system in place, the space closes rapidly, transforming what seemed like a routine maneuver into a trap zone where there is no safe clearance. Never, ever stand between a reversing vehicle and a fixed structure, because even the smallest movement of the machine can remove all margin for safety. A worker stands at the edge of an open pit, then a swinging load from behind sends him over. Inside a large warehouse, cranes lift heavy bags of material, moving them across open processing pits. The pits are uncovered, deep, and lined up along the floor. One worker stands near the edge, focused on the task ahead, while another moves farther along the row. Above them, a suspended load hangs from the crane, swinging slightly as it's lowered into position. As the crane shifts, the load swings wide. In seconds, the heavy bundle veers dangerously close to the edge where workers stand. The force of the swing collides with the open pit hazard, aligning suspended loads and unprotected drop zones into one catastrophic chain of risk. What began as routine hoisting suddenly exposes the workspace to uncontrollable danger. Never, ever allow workers to stand at unprotected edges while suspended loads are in motion. One unexpected swing can turn the workspace itself into a trap. Every hoisting zone must have strict exclusion areas. Open pits should be barricaded or covered, and workers must never position themselves between a load's swing path and an edge. On a quiet work site, one spark met the wrong container, turning routine grinding into a violent blast. The worker had positioned an old metal drum on the ground, preparing to cut through its surface with an angle grinder. It seemed ordinary, just another step in a day's labor. The grinding wheel screeched as sparks rained across the drum, but no one knew what still lingered inside. Within seconds, the sealed drum reacts. Residual flammable vapors ignite, and the container erupts in a violent blast. Smoke and debris tear across the worksite, as what looked like routine grinding suddenly unleashes the full force of trapped energy. Never, ever cut or weld on closed containers unless they are completely cleaned, vented, and certified safe, because any trace of flammable material can turn them into an explosive hazard. A worker leans across a press to adjust material, then the machine closes without warning. In a busy factory, sheets of material move along a conveyor into a massive press. The machine is designed to cut or compact with immense force. One worker steps forward, adjusting a sheet with his hands, trying to get it aligned perfectly. It's a common scene in industrial production. Speed matters, accuracy matters, but so does timing. As the worker leans across the table, the press suddenly cycles. In an instant, the heavy plates drop and the safe gap vanishes. What looked like a routine adjustment instantly becomes a hazardous entrapment zone as the machine closes automatically without pause. Never, ever reach into the danger zone of a press while it is active. Machines don't stop for hesitation, they only stop for safeguards. Industrial presses must always be equipped with interlocks, barriers, or two-hand controls that prevent workers from entering the area during cycles. Training should stress that alignment must be done only when machines are locked out or stopped. Inside a machine shop, a suspended load begins to tilt, and within seconds, gravity decides the outcome no one can stop. Overhead, a chain hoist is anchored to a steel column, its hook lowered to lift a heavy steel block, large, angular, and weighing far more than the workers standing around it. 3 workers cluster around the block, guiding the piece upright. Their hands are on the steel, their weight leaned in, pushing and steadying. The entire operation is being carried out manually, each man within arm's reach of the suspended mass. There are no guide poles, no barriers, no exclusion zone, just human hands against steel and the assumption that the lift will hold steady. As the block tilts, the balance shifts in an instant. The suspended load sways out of alignment, slipping off center. With no taglines or control, the steel piece swings down hard, striking the floor and sending a jolt through the shop. What began as a steady lift suddenly turns into a dangerous, uncontrolled drop zone. Loads don't fail slowly, they fail all at once. Never, ever stand within the fall zone of a suspended load, and never guide heavy steel with your hands or body. Use taglines, lift points designed for balance, and keep clear. Inside a steel plant in China, a stream of molten metal falls, and in seconds, the factory floor erupts into fire. In this factory, giant overhead cranes move heavy ladles filled with molten metal. The liquid inside burns at over 1,000 degrees, glowing bright white. Workers move below, guiding production, as the crane positions itself over the pouring zone. Everything seems routine. The transfer of liquid steel is an everyday part of smelting, but things soon went wrong. As the crane swings the ladle into position, a thin stream escapes, striking the floor and igniting instantly. The spill flashes outward, feeding into surrounding debris and triggering a chain of fire across the work zone. In moments, the routine transfer of molten steel unravels into a full-scale emergency. Never, ever underestimate molten metal. Even a small leak can escalate into a full-scale explosion when liquid steel contacts the floor or moisture. Steel plants demand absolute vigilance. Equipment carrying molten metal must be inspected constantly. Workers must stay clear of pour zones, shielded and protected, with emergency plans ready. A worker in a bucket lift reaches for the line. Then in a flash, the sky ignites. It's a bright day at a high-voltage substation. Towers, insulators, and conductors stretch in every direction, carrying immense electrical energy. A bucket truck positions its lift beneath the lines. Inside the bucket, a lineman in full protective gear prepares to work. From the ground, it looks calm, precise, almost routine. But this is no ordinary environment. These lines hold thousands of volts, energy that waits for the smallest mistake to unleash chaos. The worker maneuvers near the live conductor. In an instant, the air becomes a pathway, and a violent arc flash erupts. A blinding burst of energy tears outward, filling the sky with fire and smoke. The controlled calm of the substation shatters as raw electricity roars across the yard. Electricity doesn't forgive distance errors. High voltage can arc through the air, and one wrong approach can unleash explosive force. Every live line job must follow strict clearance rules with insulated equipment, tested PPE, and fail-safe procedures. Workers must never assume gear alone will protect them. The only true shield is maintaining safe distance and control, because in high-voltage work, even the air can turn against you. In a crowded fuel yard, a worker standing high on a tanker makes one careless move that triggers a reaction capable of wiping out everything around him. The midday sun beats down on a crowded yard of tanker trucks. One man stands on top of a white tanker using a metal tool, unaware that every strike inches closer to ignition. In an instant, the tank ignites and flames leap upward. The blast transforms the yard into chaos, threatening not just one vehicle, but the entire line of fuel-filled tankers. Never, ever work with tools or open equipment on a fuel tanker without strict control of ignition sources. Vapors are invisible, but they turn the smallest spark into a deadly explosion. This was preventable. Fuel handling demands grounded tools, vapor control, and zero tolerance for ignition. In tanker yards, one careless act doesn't just endanger a worker, it puts the entire fleet at risk. Don't forget to share what you learned today in the comments. Your insight could save a life. Take care.